What's going on, everybody? Sean Daniel from Guitar Control here, and you don't need me to tell you that there is a lot of ugliness in this world, and it's up to the beautiful people such as yourself and myself to supply the world with the beauty that it is usually so desperately lacking. So today, we're going to manifest that beauty with the power of major 7 arpeggios. But this isn't just going to be a regular arpeggio lesson where we kind of run through a bunch of shapes. We're going to practically use some of these in kind of like a real life situation. So let's get started right away, and we're going to do it in the people's key, the key of G. And you definitely want to click below here to get the tab for this to follow along, because we're going to go through a couple different patterns, and I think it's going to be easier to kind of see how these arpeggios are working through the fretboard when you kind of see it laid out in front of you, okay? So once you get that, let's get right going in the people's key, the key of G. And we're going to start by introducing a major 7 arpeggio. If you've never played that, all that is an arpeggio is when you take a chord and play it one note at a time. So if you have like a G major chord, you can arpeggiate that a couple different ways. The most common way you might see people doing it is just by playing one note at a time, forward and backwards, right? Which is kind of pretty. You know, it's kind of like maybe like a nice sunset. But that's not pretty, that's not beautiful enough. We need to add the 7th note of the major scale to make a major 7 arpeggio. So it's not just a sunset, it's a sunset at the beach, which is how beautiful this is going to end up sounding. So again, if we just take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th notes of the G major scale, we get a G major chord, a combination of the notes G, B, and D. So if you don't know what that means, all you just take is this one scale, the major scale, which I highly recommend you learn this. In fact, I'll put this on the tab too. All it is just 3rd fret on the E string, 5th fret on the E string, 2, 3, 5 on the A string, 2, 4, 5. 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5. Those are the 7 notes of the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, the octave. So when we number them like that, then we can find the numbers that we use to make a major 7 chord. Again, a G major chord just being a 1, a 3, and a 5, G, B, D. The 7th note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, an F sharp. You don't even have to think of it as an F sharp, just think of it as the 7th note. 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, so to arpeggiate a G major 7 chord, we're already starting to get pretty here. We got a 1, 3, 5, 7. We can go forward and backwards. Again, that kind of sounds like an exercise in and of itself, but eventually we're going to start adding this to chords in a different way. But before we do that, I want to do another octave of this to make a 2-octave run throughout the fretboard. So to do that, all we need are the notes of the G major scale in one full position. So if we do that, and again, if I'm assigning every fret a finger, I don't have to use the numbers of the frets. I don't have to be like 3E, 5E, 2A, 3A, 5A. I can just use my fingers. So the low E string is going to be middle pinky. The A string is index, middle pinky. Index, ring, pinky. Index, ring, pinky. Middle pinky, index, middle pinky. And the reason that's really important is because then we learn one arpeggio shape, but we actually learn 12 different spots because there's 12 notes, so you can do that anywhere. So if you wanted to do something in A, you just have to find A, like the 5th fret of the E string, and you could do the same thing. Okay, so all these are going to be movable ideas. But basically, to do the next octave of the arpeggio, it's really, really simple. We just go through the first one we did, 1, 3, 5, 7, and there's 8, or 1 again. The same thing, same note, just a higher pitched G. And now we're going to staircase it up. Okay, so all I did there is I've got my pinky on the 5th fret of the D string, my ring finger. When I say staircase, I'm just going down a string higher, back, lower 1 fret. So 5D, 4G, 3B, 2E, and then I can close it with another G, which is where we started. We can resolve that arpeggio. So we have 2 ideas. Now the nice thing about this one is you can play this as a chord voicing. This is a G major 7 chord voicing. Again, movable. A major 7 to G major 7. Or you can pick it up. A lot of different options that you have with arpeggiated chord voicings that all exist on different strings, okay? So if we combine those, we've got the first octave arpeggio, 1, 3, 5, 7, that leads us right into the next one. 1, 3, 5, 7, 1. So a great exercise is to do this forwards and backwards. Another thing you can do is alternate pick it. It's a great way to kind of just improve your picking chops. There's a lot of different things you can do with this. Now, one of the most valuable things about learning arpeggios, if you're just kind of getting into arpeggios for the first time, is just using them to kind of work as a roadmap through the fretboard. Now, you don't always have to play an arpeggio in order like this. When I say in order, I'm either ascending 1, 2, 3, or 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, or descending. You can kind of see how these notes relate to each other and skip around. So I know that I have this first shape here. I can maybe skip from like the 1 to the 7 to the 8. And I can use different fingers now. Even though in my mind's eye, I'm seeing this as a shape. There's that 7, the 1 to the 7 to the 8 in the major scale. I can just go from a... and then take a little piece of that next part. Again, I'm just kind of screwing around at this point. I'm not even thinking of where I'm going. I'm just moving around in that shape. And I think ultimately, thinking of arpeggios in that way is a much more useful way to practically use them. So if you're doing something in the key of G, where you're just playing a G chord, instead of just sitting on this G chord the whole time, maybe, you know, there's other people playing with you and you kind of want to do something a little bit different instead of just hanging on this G forever. I can jump to the top of that arpeggio. I can jump inside it. I'm just kind of moving around inside that. I'm not even thinking of this in order, but I'm inflecting a G chord. I'm almost replacing this with groups of notes that I'm seeing as an arpeggio. Now, there are also other arpeggios that we can kind of go to within the same key. Specifically, if we're in the key of G, the 4 chord is going to have these same notes existing in it, right? So what I mean by that is if we take that G major scale again, 1, 2, 3, 4, that 4th note is a C. So the 4th chord in the key of G is a C major. Now, we can play those same shapes on a C. So the C, the 8th fret on the E string, let's go to that right now. Everything we just did on the G, we can repeat on the C and still stay in the same key. Okay, so I can jump into any one of these parts, but I want to learn one other shape that's also a chord voicing that we can incorporate in the C major chord that's closer to where we started with this position on the neck. And that's going to be just how we found it in the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 3rd fret of the A string, which is a C, is going to be our root note. So we're going to make a C major chord, but instead of open C major, we're going to use this voice of a major 7 chord. So what I have here is I have a 3A, I have a 5D, a 4G, and a 5B. So I have a C, a G, its major 7B, and an E. I have the root note, the 5th, the 7th, and the 3rd, the major 3rd. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's my C and there's my B, right? That interval right there is the most beautiful thing in music, I'm telling you. It's awesome. You can kind of like work these in with each other. So we could go from a G, instead of just a G chord, to a C chord. We can start adding a G to a C to a G to a C. Now all I'm doing is from that G, I'm just working that first octave in between strums. And that's a good way to kind of incorporate maybe a little bit of like lead playing into your rhythm playing, where you can just strum a little bit into a C chord. And I'm starting an open C, but I'm still thinking of this chord voicing that we just learned. If you didn't already know this one, I can maybe think in my mind's eye where my middle finger is. That's that 7. That's that interval that we really want. It's the 4th fret on the G string. So even though I'm in an open position, my brain is thinking I want to incorporate this note somehow, which that note is a B. The easiest way to do that with a C chord is just open that up to make a major 7. But that's not a totally movable shape. I like thinking in this shape right here because we could do that in any key. Like if we were in the key of B, for instance, and we wanted to take like the 4th of B, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an E. I could have an E major 7 arpeggio. All right. But anyways, back to this regular open C. Kind of adding that too. And another thing about playing a fretted B, even though that open B is available to us, you can add vibrato to it to really kind of hammer home the beauty of that tropical sunset that we're adding just by adding that 7th note in the major scale. And then maybe kind of get the bottom part of that. Again, this is the voicing that should be in your mind's eye. You don't always have to play with these fingers. You can use whatever fingers are available to you. So I'm just jumping around and seeing these arpeggios and breaking them into smaller pieces. Even though maybe I'm not playing them as arpeggios, learning them as arpeggios has kind of given me the opportunity to see where they exist on the fretboard into a C. There's something just classy about playing them one after another. You know, if you're like at a wine and cheese bar, you could just be like, excuse me, I'm just gonna play some arpeggios, don't mind me, and then just go from a G into a C, into a higher voicing. A lot of different options that you have available to you, and it really comes from just a couple different patterns. This first one that we learned, 1 octave, 1, 3, 5, 7. The second octave of it, the staircase, combining them, and then adding the chord voicing of the 4 chord, just like that. So hopefully you learned a little bit about major 7 arpeggios, and you're ready to get out into the world and spread that beauty as often and as classy as you can with the help of major 7 arpeggios. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and we'll get back to you as soon as you can. Thanks a lot. So if you like this lesson on arpeggios, I definitely encourage you to subscribe to this channel first and foremost, and also to maybe click some of these boxes that are floating around my head. Now you may not know this, but currently I cannot see these boxes, so I'm not sure what's in them, but through the magic of post-production, other lessons will be in there, some of them possibly even with me.